next topic, the census. A decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. You remember Linus and Charlie Brown Christmas, the banky in hand, and giving this soliloquy under the spotlight. Okay, so the census. It came about in those days that a decree went from Caesar Augustus that a census should be taken of the inhabited earth. Now, this particular census, please be aware that words change meaning and context helps define words. So a census for us is where people come around and they survey us in our homes, and there's no money that changes hands or anything like that. They're just trying to get an accurate count for the purposes of things like how you apportion districts and how many different people in the House of Representatives come from this state as opposed to that state and stuff like that. It has largely to do with voting and representation. This census has to do with taxation. It has to do with money. Okay, so this census to be taken of all the inhabited earth. This was the first census taken while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. All were proceeding to register for this census, everyone to his own city. Joseph went up from Galilee. This is what we're going to be tracing next week, when we're looking at this holy journey that Mary and Joseph take from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Joseph and Mary went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David that's called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, in order to register, this is that for the census, actually for the property tax, along with Mary, who is engaged to him, who was with child. Now, back to our old friend Josephus, and I mean literally old. He's 2,000 years old. He's as old as the writers of the New Testament. So Archelaus, he says, territory was added to the province of Syria, and this Cyrenius, that's just another version, another way of spelling Quirinius. So this is the same guy. Luke and Josephus are talking about the same Roman governor dispatched from Caesar to rule over not just Israel, but of all of that area that we would call Lebanon, part of Turkey today. Quirinius was sent by Caesar to take account of the people's property in Syria. So it's about a property tax. Okay, you got that, right? In other words, Josephus is in some way clarifying and modifying or amplifying what Luke says. Josephus also says about this same Quirinius and about his census. Now, Cyrenius came at this time to Syria, being sent by Caesar, this would be Caesar Augustus, to take account of their substance. And then he mentions just a few words later, a taxation. Now it's really clear. In other words, when we put Luke and Josephus together, we've got a biblical book, and then we've got this historical stuff provided for us by a first century land of Israel, Hebrew-speaking, Greek-writing Jew, that we hear about a taxation. And so this is not guesswork, I didn't, like pull out and flip a shekel to determine what kind of census is this. We have the data here in front of us. So this has to do with property tax, which I'm sure that most of you who own property know about. So they gave an account of their estates. There we get it again, this kind of reference to property, taxation, and estates, substance. Now, let's talk for just a second about Roman rule in the land of Israel. The Romans came and annexed the land of Israel in 63 BC. So by the time Jesus begins his ministry, the Romans are very well entrenched in the land of Israel. They have been in control of this area for 100 years, give or take a few days. And so these guys have a vast military, a gigantic empire, and they far eclipse in power anything that Jewish rebels or anybody that wanted to, cause a disturbance or a problem could try to muster. And they flexed that muscle. They didn't mind flexing that muscle. When I was a kid, I used to think, well, the Romans came up with crucifixion for Jesus just because they hated him so much. He was the only one. I'd forgotten that there were thieves on either side of Jesus, right? At the very time. I just never mind about that. Just focusing on Jesus, and I guess that's the way it happened. Now, the Romans had borrowed crucifixion from the Greeks, who got it from the Persians, who got it from the Babylonians, who got it from the Assyrians. It goes back to the 9th century BC. But the Romans had perfected it, and it was their favorite form of execution. So anybody who needed to be executed, most often they were going to be crucified. We have accounts from Josephus as well as other authors, Roman authors, that there are thousands of people at certain points in history crucified at the same time. Crucified at the same time. Josephus tells us that in AD 70, just before the walls were breached and Jerusalem was invaded by the Romans, they'd been under siege for months, that the Romans couldn't find places for any more crosses. That meant that basically they were touching end to end all around Jerusalem as a way of doing psychological warfare against the people who were still defending the city. Anybody that tried to escape, anybody that they found in the countryside that needed a good crucifixion, they were nailing them up to the tune of hundreds and thousands all around the city of Jerusalem. So another aspect of Roman rule was that Romans were really into taxes, because they would use taxes from conquered provinces to go and conquer other provinces, or to put down some rebellion somewhere, or just to pay their soldiers well. So Romans were not very much interested in equity or equality in terms of taxation. They got what they could get, and this was the status in Jesus' day. It was heavy-handed military occupation. People like Pontius Pilate, who was one of only 12 Roman governors, were military governors. They weren't elected. They didn't serve a certain term. They served at the behest of Caesar, and they answered only to him, and they were military officers dispatched specifically to take care of problematic areas like the land of Israel that would often rebel or refuse to pay taxes. So this is the kind of situation that we find ourselves in at the time of Jesus. Probably not a kinder, gentler nation, if anybody remembers George Bush the First. Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a puppet king. He was Jewish by conversion. He was Edomite by birth. But he was Jewish by conversion, and the Romans chose to rule through him as long as he lived. After 4 BC, all bets were off, but for as long as Herod the Great was, around, the Romans ruled through him. So the Romans appointed him, the Roman Senate voted him to be given the title King of the Jews. Have you ever heard that title before? Where is he who has been born, not appointed, born King of the Jews? And then when Herod heard that, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. Do you begin to sense the tension and the problems of competing interests and people who are wanting to rule? Okay, so Herod the Great got his appointment in 37 BC. It took him 3 years to conquer his own people and his own country so that he could rule them. And so in 34 BC, he starts his actual reign from Jerusalem, and also later from a city that he would build from scratch called Caesarea, named for Caesar, as in Augustus, his patron. Herod the Great was not much of a practicing Jew. Most of what he did was, even though he was Jewish by conversion, was for external purposes. It was PR. It was for show. When Jews' backs were turned, he was building pagan temples in other countries. He was financing Olympic Games, where all kinds of debauchery and nude wrestling and all kinds of stuff were going on that people back home would not like. He was building Greek cities with all of the Greek statues and bathhouses and other accoutrements, brothels, etc., that were a part of that. The city of Samaria, for example, was rebuilt, named Sebaste in honor of Augustus Caesar. That was one of Caesar's names, Sebaste, the one worthy of worship is the way it shakes out in English. And that did not really endear him to his Jewish subjects. They hated him, and he returned the favor. He couldn't stand them either. On his deathbed, this we're told by Josephus, on his deathbed, he had a couple of his sons who were born of Jewish women who were therefore Jewish, had them drowned. Right before he died, he was afraid that they were going to take over his kingdom. It's like you're going to die in 2 days, right? Another thing that Herod the Great did, well, he had 10 wives, and he ended up killing all of them. This is the Herod that we know and love. This is the guy you read about in the Bible, all right? So Herod the Great also, he capped off all of his misdeeds by rounding up about 800 of the most well-known Jewish leaders, teachers, and putting them in a stadium down in Jericho. And he gave orders to his army, at the moment of my death, the whole country is going to rejoice. So in order to get the whole country to mourn, I want you to put to death all of their religious leaders, all 800 of them. Not guilty of any crime, they hadn't done anything to him personally. I want the entire country in a state of mourning at my death. So what he was going to do is he was going to sacrifice 800 other human beings in order to accomplish those means. It's like, I wonder what good you would really benefit from that. You're going to be dead. I don't know. Maybe he was as bad at math as I was. Anyway, that's the Herod that we hear about, killing the babies in Bethlehem, wanting to put Jesus to death because he's the one born, not appointed, but born, King of the Jews. I want to look at some ancient texts, probably some that you won't see anywhere else. My area in doctoral work and then in my 30 years of teaching has been Jewish backgrounds of the New Testament. There's a ton of literature that has been preserved for us to mine, to learn from, that records the teachings of the early rabbis from the time of Jesus, before and just a little bit after. So that's the literature that I would like to mine, if you will, to look at what were people thinking popularly about who the Messiah was going to be, and things he was going to do, and the like. And get ready, because this is their aspirations. Remember all the problems that were going on with Rome: the taxation, the military occupation, the paganism, the crucifixions without trial, and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, this then informs this kind of messianic hope. And so what you hear popularly in Sunday school lessons or in sermons or whatever, you're going to have the opportunity tonight to see the actual ancient literature that stands behind that sort of broader brushed picture that people paint in their sermons and teaching material. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to look at the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. In Micah chapter 5, which corresponds with Matthew chapter 2, this is a reference to the birth of the Messiah. As for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, too little among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth from me to be a ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of all our eternity. That suggests to me pre-existence and eternality. Jesus' life didn't begin in the stable or in the manger. Jesus has existed. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of all eternity. So even Micah knows this in the 8th century BC. All right. Then in the Gospel of John, we have something. So I'm starting with Bible, and then we'll jump off into the rabbis. The question comes up in Jesus' ministry: hasn't the Scripture said that the Christ comes from the offspring of David? He's going to be royalty, right? He's going to be a kingly figure. And from Bethlehem, the village where David was. So these are bystanders, onlookers. And they're interacting with these teachings of Jesus and the things that he's doing. And they're going, but wait a minute. If he's the Messiah, Christ and Messiah, they mean the same thing. Christ is Greek, Messiah is Hebrew. then why is it then, how can he be the Messiah if he's from Nazareth? Is this not Jesus the carpenter from Nazareth, right? People know about Jesus as being from Nazareth. So, but wait a minute, isn't he supposed to be from Bethlehem? Why? Because that's what Micah says. That's the prediction. We even have this in Herod's question to the religious leaders. Where's the Messiah supposed to be born? Well, he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. By the way, 5 miles from Jerusalem. You can walk there in, like an hour and a half. 5 miles. When I was a kid, and you see the Christmas cantatas and stuff like that, and I used to think, okay, when the wise men left Jerusalem, then they're on the way to Bethlehem, and there are sandstorms, and there are howling jackals, and these people are getting old. They're having birthdays on the way. They're qualifying for Social Security. Folks are dying and being buried as they trek this great journey, this epic journey from Jerusalem. That you can see Bethlehem from Jerusalem, and you can see Jerusalem from Bethlehem. They're within eyesight of one another. So anyway, that's, pardon? Yeah, just sort of growing, and they indeed are. Jerusalem and Bethlehem, as they grow, are growing together. Jerusalem today and Bethlehem today are bigger than they've ever been in all of history. So they're, expanding. We have suburban sprawl going on in the Middle East as we sit here. All right. So now we go to the works of the rabbis and watch what happens. This is a kind of like a commentary on the book of Ruth. And the rabbis say when Boaz tells Ruth, come here, he's referring to the King Messiah, who will draw near to the royalty, to the kingship. He's going to reign. He is going to rule. Do you see this in Jesus' life and ministry? First coming, do you see this? We see it in the second coming. We see it in the book of Revelation. We see it in some of this stuff that Paul and even that Jesus says about when it's going to happen the second time. When Jesus comes back, he's going to be the king. He's going to have the white horse. He's going to have the two-edged sword, etc., etc. He's going to be leading legions of saints and angels, etc. But the first coming, he's humble. He's riding on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He's healing. He's suffering. He's dying. So you have two different kinds of things going on, two different messianic programs, first coming and second coming. These guys, they see it all from so far away, I guess, or whatever. They're pouring it all into one coming. And so he's going to draw near to kingship. He's going to eat the bread of royalty, yeah? Eating the bread of royalty. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. And then the Messiah comes, and it's, anybody remember Karate Kid parts 1 through 7 or whatever it is? Wax on, wax off. That's what the Messiah is going to do. He will, and the quote is from Isaiah chapter 11, this is biblical. This is going to happen. But what Jesus taught us to understand is the first coming is mercy, and it's to deal with sin. The second time is judgment and to deal with sinners. See the difference? Okay. Jesus is the one to make that differentiation, not the ancient prophets of the Old Testament, not even the rabbis around the time of Jesus. So he will smite the land with the rod of his mouth. So this is what they're expecting. They're quoting these Old Testament references. When the Messiah comes, first time, right out of the chute, this is what it's going to look like. Another commentary, early rabbinic commentary. This time it's on the book of Numbers. The staff of Aaron, the high priest, that budded, that then got put inside the Ark of the Covenant. I think Indiana Jones found it in the first movie. Was held in the hand of each and every king. It says according to the rabbis. And this staff will also be held in the hand of the King Messiah. Do you see that, the language? The King Messiah. And he's going to be ruling with a ruler's staff in his hand. That goes all the way back to Aaron the high priest. This is the idea that the early rabbis had. As is stated, Yahweh is going to stretch forth from Zion your mighty staff. May you rule in the midst of your enemies. And you know that that played, right? When you had your favorite cousin has just been crucified, you know, or your uncle has gone out of business because he's been taxed into oblivion or something like that. When the heavy hand of the Roman army has come in and taken all of the stores that you had planned to last the rest of the winter, and they took it, they mustered it just because they needed to feed their soldiers. Yeah, he's going to rule in the midst of these enemies. He'll be in control. He's going to take care of these problems. Another rabbinic commentary on the book of Esther this time. There will be a procession of messengers with gifts for the Messiah. These are like paying tribute to him. He's a conquering king like David or like Solomon, where leaders of Moab and Edom and the Ammonites and the Arameans and the Philistines, they're coming and they're paying tribute to this conquering king. You see the difference in kind of kingdom programs that are going on. Jesus has his first coming. It doesn't look exactly like this. And this is one of the problems that he has to deal with in his earthly ministry. People are expecting one thing and Jesus delivers another thing. And some people can get along with that. They can shift gears and go with that program. Other people are going, but wait a minute, our teachers have taught us. We learned in synagogue. We memorized this stuff. This is what we've always been doing. This is what we really need, y'all. We can talk about forgiveness of sin after you get that Roman boot off my neck. Yeah? Yes, and all of the, listen to this. You know this plays well. It's a quote from Psalm 72. All the kings of the earth will prostrate themselves before him. They're going to bow down and do homage to him. This is the kind of Messiah that's, yes, it's predicted in the Old Testament. Jesus says, yes, but that's second coming activity. First coming activity, we're going to take care of people's heart condition, people's sin problem, get people right with God, and then that kingdom will expand and grow from the inside out, like the mustard seed, for example. This is a rabbinic commentary on the book of Lamentations. How will he restore the righteous to their rightful place? When the Holy One, blessed be he, God, will raise up the horn of his Messiah, as is written, he will give power to his king and victory to his anointed one. The word anointed one is Mashiach, Messiah. This is from a huge, Encyclopedia Britannica size set called the Babylonian Talmud. So just a big compendium of rabbinic teaching, learning. Okay, Abaye, one of the famous rabbi, says that David and his son, the Messiah, are going to rule in tandem, like an emperor and his viceroy. And the Messiah is going to be the king, and David is going to be the second in command. Yeah, we'll skip that. You can have this if you want it. I'll give it to anybody that's interested. I can just email it to you. Another rabbinic commentary. When the Messiah comes, they will not see the birth pangs of the Messiah, as it says, Ho, Zion, flee from Edom, which in the world of the rabbis becomes code for Rome. Becomes code for Rome. I have a reason. I think I've figured it out, but I may be wrong, so it doesn't matter. We're not going to go into that. Why did they use Edom? It's just the way that it's spelled and the way Hebrew letters look and stuff like that. But anyway, Edom becomes code for the rabbis for Rome. That way they can, make fun of Rome and they can cast aspersions on Rome and get away with it because they're not saying Rome, they're saying Edom. And Greece, because of their decrees. Run from Edom. Run from Rome and Greece because of their decrees. So the focuses of current messianic expectation, first century messianic, beliefs, hopes, aspirations, is that it is exclusively a redemption that's going to happen for Jews, not for the whole world. It's going to be the major expression of the messianic rule is going to be external: freedom from enemies, freedom from taxation, freedom from crucifixion, rather than internal. It's going to manifest itself more in terms of physical stuff. all kinds of, gold, all kinds of silver, lots of crops, plenty of oil. Everybody's going to have a plenty of everything. Primarily physical, not primarily spiritual. You see the differences? This is this is what we think, and this is what people in the first century were thinking. It's going to be primarily nationalistic. The focus is going to be on a revival of Israel's sovereignty and self-determination, as opposed to each person comes before this God individually. It's a one-on-one sort of thing. It's not a collective kind of thing. We get redeemed individual by individual, one by one by one. They're thinking in terms of the redemption of the entire nation, all at one time. It's victory over one's physical enemies, not victory over one's personal sin. And so all of these it's just kind of a summation of what we saw in those ancient sources. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our videos. If you're benefiting from the content that you're receiving from them, please make sure that you're following us on Facebook and that you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. While you're at it, share our content with your friends and family. Encourage them to follow us as well. Thanks for helping us to reach as many as we can with a powerful message of God's Word in its original context.